welcome to this week's edition of the Diaspora Show on Civic Space TV. I am Kwagala, your host. On today's conversation, we explore the intersection between politics and human rights by specifically contextualizing the recent missive by the President in response to the journalist Andrew Mwenda. And we ask the question, what does this mean for the country in terms of the political and human rights accountability? But also on the program, we discuss the recent significant developments on the local and international planes, namely the amnesty program targeting the opposition, national unity, political prisoners, the 2026 Freedom House report on the Uganda human rights situation, and last but not least, the bid by Ambassador Olaara Otunnu to replace Antonio Guterres as the next Secretary General of the United Nations. I welcome you viewers once again, and it's now my honor and pleasure to introduce to you my panelists. Let me start with Joseph Ochieno, who is a UPC ideologue and a renowned political commentator, now based in the UK. It's a pleasure to have you. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, Isaac. Good to have you. I take exception that you've not introduced me as the should-be president of Uganda People's Congress, but I'm delighted to be here.
My sincerest apologies, Muse. Thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure. Also on the program we have Ambassador Namboka, Ireneo Omistosin. I hope I get the pronunciation correct. But
Mr. Senator, we shall clear up these pronunciation problems later. Thank you.
He's a former employee of the UN, now working as a consultant on human rights and governance. He's also an author and is currently based in France. How is France? Earlier we had a small conversation on the heat wave and the cost it has on human lives and the environment. How are you holding up?
Now the heat is abating and we survive. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you. And of course, we have Miriam Kyomugasho, the director for AFRICC, who is a human rights defender based in the United States. Miriam, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Hi, Isaac, and my fellow panelists from the US. I hope Kampala is fine, but it's a pleasure to be here again and have this discussion with you.
Thank you for joining us. Let me begin with Joseph. Joseph has recently been in Kampala, but I know even where he is in the UK, he's well abreast with the latest developments in Uganda. We have a letter, an explosive sort of rant by the president, where he discusses a host of issues, but for purposes of this engagement, let us focus on the main thrust, where he discusses the intersection between politics, human rights, criminality, and corruption. And at the center of this controversy is a young man by the name of Nwagaba, who reportedly, in the words of the president, came to him to seek refuge from his tormentors, whom he accuses of torturing him and maiming him. But let us bring the discussion home. Joseph, the question I am really asking is that, and it's some sort of observation, By the president making this charge against his own security system, he seems to unwittingly admit to what we all seem to know as Ugandans, and by extension the international community, that our human rights situation is very appalling. So does it validate these concerns? Is it of concern to you that the president can respond in such a manner? Yes, Joseph?
No, we kind of lost him. At least on the screen, I can't see him anymore.
Oh, sorry, but I have the pleasure to welcome Francis Kamuhanda, who is based in the United States and a member of the Alliance for National Transformation political party. Francis, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, the moderator, and it's always a pleasure discussing with senior citizens of Uganda on matters of national importance, and I hope our viewers will find this conversation interesting to watch and listen to. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed. Joseph, I realize you're now back. Did you quite get the question?
No, I did not. You know, we UPCs, we are modest, so we use old iPhone. So I'm still in the iPhone 5, where, you know, but anyway.
All right, let me repeat the question, but I hope you got the context earlier on. I first gave some sort of background to the
I got those. No, I got those.
Okay. So the question is, and it is some sort of observation on my side. Firstly, because the president seems to make the charge that his own security system has failed the country. They are responsible for torture. They are responsible for human rights violations, and unwittingly, he validates what is public knowledge in Uganda and by extension in the international community, that the human rights record of the NRM government is very appalling. So, what do you read in this? What is the motivation for the president to come out at this timing point?
I think the motivation is really bizarre, whatever it is. It's almost a sign of a guy who is to the extreme out of touch, but possibly to the extreme substantially incapacitated by the environments around him, including the fact that it may be possible that there is a fully fledged alternative regime within this extremely unfortunate regime of 40 years. In terms of him saying what is said, possibly is tired of us making the observation, so maybe he's trying to validate what Ochieno has been telling you guys in recent years, that Milton Obote, or perhaps is challenging us, that Mr. Museveni is somebody who, you know, would normally tell the truth by accident. So, if that is part of the case, he's maybe trying to do a pushback to tell us that, look, you know, I challenge Milton Obote, me, I can actually tell the truth, you know. So now you go do whatever you like, you know. Since we came in 40 years ago, we caused the mayhem in Kampala. After it caused mayhem in Luweero, we did it via Tororo, we did it in Soroti, we did it up north, we even did it in Kasese the other day, we did it in Kayunga. We now do it in the streets of Kampala without any let or hindrance, absolute impunity. We're able to arrest and detain official opposition leaders, and you can't do anything. You know, so that is what our people are doing, and we're doing it because we are on agenda, and our agenda is our agenda of what his son may call other things, but for him, he says for him and his children and children's children. So if that is the case, we can't complain that Mr. Museveni is telling us what's going on. He's basically confirming it. But I think Mr. Museveni is confirming this because of the contextual atmosphere of impunity, where he does not care about consequences, whether or not these documented stuff for which he may be called to account for at some stage, in life, either during his reign or after, or rather that even if that is done, he simply doesn't care, because who are you to do so? But that said, cynicism aside, the serious point is that a head of state can come and express themselves the way Mr. Museveni did. I know Miriam would normally say that this is not the Museveni of 1986. I suggest that this is the same Museveni that many people have always known from 1978 or thereabout at Dar es Salaam University to the 70s in Obote's office and back to the 70s in Tanzania. You see, what he does, and some of his tricks beyond what he says or does not say, nobody else will know. I met somebody yesterday who happens to have known him during the War of Liberation as it happened in the 70s. This very particular individual apparently led one of the military operations in eastern Uganda, including within my county, my county at the time, and tells me extraordinary places where they stayed, in the fight against Idi Amin, including, I must say, a farm of a former minister who was eventually killed by Idi Amin, Obotofumi. But this guy tells you that what they knew and discussed with the Musevenis then, in the 70s, against Idi Amin, and what Museveni says today is completely the opposite. But no, the more serious point is that Museveni may have been trying, like he has successfully done sometimes, to say this mess is taking place in my regime, but it's not my fault. This mess may be taking place in my regime, but it's the people whom I appoint or people who clean my house, because he says he finds some problems in his house, in his office, maybe even in his bedroom, but it's not his fault. And
in a minute, Joseph,
that actually,
are you suggesting that the president is being deceptive? Are you accusing him of deception with regards to the issue of human rights?
No, I have just told you that Mr. Museveni is for once, trying to challenge our position, people who claim that he tells the truth only by accident. So I'm trying to tell you that the gentleman is being nice to you by telling you the truth, except he's saying that I'm telling you the truth now. Okay, come, beat me, as children would say. So it's basically that, and I'm just thinking, the only thing I'm saying is that I wonder why he would come with all the confidence to express that. It's almost like, what we know about people who will have been responsible for causing death in rural villages, whether somewhere in the extremes of Ishaka or somewhere in Soroti, and they come and dance heavily at the graveside of the deceased. So that is Mr. Museveni. Some people trying to say, why might he be doing this? I'm saying he might be doing that because side by side with that, it's not a contradiction what I'm saying.
Thank you for your perspective.
He'll want to blame everybody else but himself. So in other words, he's saying this. Let me just wrap it. He's saying these things are happening, but it's not his fault. And it is the people whom he appoints, the people who works with him, or maybe sometimes you, the citizens, you allow it to happen, so you can't beat me.
Interesting. Let me move on to Francis. Francis, you are a member of the opposition political party, the Alliance for National Transformation, specifically the US chapter. And I understand that you should be following the latest developments in Uganda with particular and keen interest. The president, in his missive, cited numerous examples of criminality by and within the nation's security apparatus. And he seems to suggest that little or no accountability has been undertaken to bring these rogue elements to book. This is quite a paradoxical situation because on one hand, we have a president that sounds concerned, yet on the other, he seems to be deflecting from responsibility. How did we get to this situation? What does it tell us about his leadership style, his attitude, and his commitment to political and human rights accountability?
Thank you for that question. But as Joseph has said, that Museveni throughout history, he will only tell the truth accidentally. But most of his time, he's still, I would say, he's still NRA. He still believes that Ugandans, we are enemies, and then he's fighting us through his NRA. He has never stopped that, and therefore he will always use techniques of deception, and where it goes out of hand, then he tends to do what we would call damage control. But if we go to the first, what sparked all this, the Nwagaba issue, then a person would ask, is it cherry picking? But what has been happening to other political activists, like a very good number of NUP supporters, young people languishing in jail, others have died. Why wouldn't he come out also and get concerned if it was about getting concerned about the security of the country, getting concerned about human rights and so on? Then this prompts us that we can even probe deeper. What is his relationship between this one Nwagaba amidst all other thousands of Ugandans who are in prison, and then the president? Because like, we can't do things, or if we are building Uganda, we can't build it everything on nepotism. That when somebody who is either known to you through whichever means gets a problem, then that's when you come and react. Look at the treatment of Nwagaba, then also look at the treatment of Dr. Kizza Besigye. Look at the treatment of the former aide of Dr. Kizza Besigye, who recently on social media they were circulating a video clip showing this gentleman in a sorry state. I don't know even whether he's still alive, because the situation was so pathetic that you don't know whether he will survive. Look at how they mistreated the counsel Kizza, who was an attorney for Dr. Kizza Besigye. What about Lukwago? What about the Chivumbis? All these ones, how they are being treated. So to me, when you come and then you begin telling us that you acknowledge there is indiscipline, there are wrong elements in the army, I don't agree with that. The army, or the what would have been the Uganda People's Defense Force, which has turned to be Museveni's defense force and the son, have always been misused by them because they work on his directives. He came clearly to explain to us what the name Muhoozi means. So, to avenge. So now we have seen him avenging on Ugandans. So the question I have always asked, what is it that we did to Museveni that we deserve this kind of torture as Ugandans, so that if we need to pay a ransom for whatever he has against Ugandans to treat them the way how he's treating them, then we begin looking or running a campaign and we pay him, we know that we have settled the debt, so that we know that we are free. But otherwise, this is beyond. And always when he frames these abuses in a way that, you know, they are wrong elements, these are elements who are indisciplined, who are doing this, we are going to investigate, I don't accept, or I don't believe that. I still believe that that is deception. But 2 points that I want to put across. Now,
yes,
number
quickly.
one, yeah, that shows that in Uganda there is no independent oversight either on human rights. You saw what happened in the Human Rights Commission. I don't want to go into that. It is supposed to work independently, but you saw what happened. That means that lack of oversight that can regulate. For example, we put road signs, we put speed governors in cars because we know at some point it is by human nature there can be an excess, but then there is a regulator. But you see the regulating mechanism, the checks and balances are ignored. All the power rests in just two individuals, the father and the son, which is very dangerous to our country. So oversight, we need it. Number two, the second point I want to make is that Museveni is not addressing any problem. Because if what he's doing damage control, maybe it has gone beyond what but otherwise he would be condemning the arbitrary arrests and detentions of innocent Ugandans or people who are participating as the constitutional mandates in the political destiny or the destiny of our country, and it is constitutional because this is our country. But other than that, he's just playing on the citizen's mind, but he's doing nothing completely.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Francis, for your viewpoints. Ambassador, let me invite you to also give us your thoughts on this topic, especially regarding the context and the timing, because the president's missive comes hot on the heels of a scathing assessment by the UN Human Rights Chief. In that statement, he points out that Uganda's human rights record is rapidly deteriorating and that the government is responsible for a number of violations, not limited to the recent brazen attack on the Nation Media Group, which is a major media entity in the country, the arbitrary arrest, detention, and prosecution of key opposition figures. Francis has highlighted the case of Dr. Chiza Besigye, including his attorney, Elias Lukwago. So in terms of global accountability, should we be worried as Ugandans that anytime soon, perhaps, there could be another package or range of sanctions applied on Uganda, which of course has the inevitable result of impacting directly the citizen in some respect? Should Ugandans worry about the current trajectory of things?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, I wonder, because my screen
Yes,
isn't
sure,
okay.
sure we can.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, what you hadn't mentioned at the beginning of our discussion was the fact that there was a big statement from the United Nations human rights system. You had only talked about the letter that Andrew Mwenda had written, and then this had triggered off the presidential outpour of things he has said. Now, I thought, first of all, after the comments made by my compatriots, I think one should be interested to know how come Andrew Mwenda, who is not necessarily an agent against the state of our country, he's basically someone that is more or less among the confidants of the president himself, if you've been following media over the years, and that he should have written to trigger off this kind of presidential statement condemning abuses of human rights. That aspect calls for close scrutiny.
Ambassador, maybe to highlight just an important insight, the president accuses him of leading an effort to spy on him. He actually characterizes it as a scheme that has been leading this effort for quite some time, but he has the confidence that he can fend it off.
That falls back into what my colleagues have said. The president has established himself as someone who always speaks the opposite of what he's saying. So when you hear that, it could mean really that this is not an attack on the president from Andrew Mwenda. I'm saying if people are following media, not just over last month, but over years, so it is quite a problem that the president has to handle. Now, to believe what he said is another discussion, but I think enough has been said to say the president has not established himself as a person who says the truth. That becomes a very big problem to deal with. So hardly anybody will believe that he cares about human rights, that when the forces or the members of the security forces do wrong, they haven't been doing it with his knowledge. Like my friends have asked, a man like the bodyguard of the leader of the opposition, Kyagulanyi, the man who was taken and put into the basement and shaved and brutalized and taught languages, and the president hasn't known anything about this. Now we have the recent, the man who had been released or given bail briefly and then picked up, and the head of state doesn't know about this. So believing what the president says is very, very difficult. I will be brief on that. Now, coming to the fact that the United Nations human rights system comes out to deliver a damning report and a warning, that internationally is very heavy, because the United Nations system to which we subscribe has established a United Nations Human Rights Commission, and every country is under watch. I was part of this system, and it's not an adversarial system. It goes, politely seeks audience with the head of state where they consider, like now in Uganda, there are difficulties. The judiciary doesn't seem to work very well. Prisoners, people legally detained or imprisoned for wrongdoing, how are they treated? And these things happen. But Uganda, on record, asked the representative office of the system to leave the country a few years ago. So there is no Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights there. I'm in the middle of something. Okay. So that is a question. Then comes the issue of the cases now at hand. Those people that have disappeared, or people that have been incarcerated, people that need to have justice, and it's difficult to have anybody who is informed. You have to have anybody who is informed, because unfortunately our people generally in the country need not be as informed as everybody might be. But for some of us who have had to play roles of following states in the way they respect constitutionality, in the way the rule of law is practiced, our country really is very, very worrying.
Ambassador, as you wrap up your discussion, are you worried that the current trajectory of things could be exposing our country to potential sanctions by the international human rights accountability systems or mechanisms?
I don't think you want to go farther than what is done, because you see, the United Nations human rights mechanisms have already declared that the situation is unsatisfactory. Now, when you talk about sanctions, the UN can put sanctions and countries which are friendly to Uganda on a bilateral basis violate them. So for me, if there is worry, it began years ago. Because even if the United Nations today declared that no country should trade with Uganda, that does not prevent countries which have bilateral arrangements and shared interests with the regime to trade. And the United Nations, unlike a given country, the UN has no police. The UN has no, no army. The International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice are, I don't know what to call them. They are symptomatic. They are just a view. I think you will have followed recently what happened on the state of Israel and the US on the massacres in Gaza and in Palestine. And even though 100 and maybe 40 member states of the UN were against that war, the war continues.
Thank you, Ambassador, thank you for your insights. Let me move on to Miriam. Miriam, you are based in the States, and the US is a very strong and enduring partner of Uganda. We have very active and deep bilateral ties. They sponsor most of our military healthy programs. In the education sector, a lot of social service delivery component of the government. But on the specific issue of human rights and political accountability, there is a resilience, if you like. It is very concerning to the Ugandan citizen, to the extent now that the American embassy in Uganda no longer deems it fit to even issue statements of denunciation against these brazen violations. So maybe if you could just paint for us a picture. What is the attitude of Washington with respect to the current human rights situation in Uganda? What is their mind, their thought process about this? Should we expect any intervention? Have they since left us to our own fate? We read it as betrayal here.
Thank you, Isaac. I think ever since the change of regime in the US to the current government, which was 1.5 years ago or so, they changed their foreign policy. They changed their outlook on international matters, and for them, they adopted whatever they call America First, and they care more about issues to deal with their own sphere, like whatever their interests and whatever is going to affect them directly. And in that aspect, that's when you see that they withdrew the US aid and all agencies which were working on human rights and governance and all the areas that they were particularly invested in, like the health sector and all. So it's not only the US, actually even Europe and other big, they are called development partners, quote unquote. But those agencies which were interested in being the watchdog over the human rights and governance in developing countries, they have kind of stepped back. And it shouldn't be a case of hopelessness on our side. We shouldn't be so dependent on foreigners so that if a neighbor says, oh, come on, take care of your house, I'm stepping back, you should be able to step up and take charge of your own affairs. So in that aspect, we all see this coming. It's been long overdue. I think it's even high time the nature of international civil society or non-governmental sectors is kind of changing, is undergoing a transformation. We can't tell how it's gonna be like, but it won't be as it was before. The challenge is
Miriam, yes.
the dictators in Africa have taken advantage of that. So they are further disempowering the civil society. The civil society, which includes international civil society and the local. So the civil society, all non-governmental actors, which would come in to check and provide check and balances on the governments about human rights, about governance, about freedoms and democracy in general, are all kind of like squeezed and pushed in a corner, and the dictators are just having a field day across board. So the question, Isaac, we should be posing to all of us, to ourselves, to other Africans, to Ugandans in general, to everybody as citizens of this world, or especially for developing countries, is what can we do to ensure that we have democracy at home, to ensure that we are building our institutions to be able to take on matters independently without having to rely on the foreigners as we used to.
That's a legitimate question, Miriam, but let me take you back to your interesting analogy.
Yes.
Where if someone were to leave you in the care of their home and eventually they return, then they have the responsibility to organize their affairs. So in this case, as Ugandans, you are stressing that it is our primary responsibility to put affairs right. But I want to ask the question, where we no longer express agents as citizens, where our capacity to politically mobilize, to even agitate, has been, since stripped away effectively by the government. What is the fate of the Ugandan citizen? I mean, what more can they explore?
The Constitution, the Article 1 of the Constitution, gives power to the people. Power belongs to the people. Ugandans, it's high time we assume our power. You see, that's what I was talking about. The over-reliance on other people to manage our affairs has somehow disabled our capacity to fight for ourselves. Why should we be so dependent on foreigners? You look at the struggles. We fought for our own independence on our own. These were our fathers didn't even have guns, didn't even have phones, didn't even have road networks to coordinate, to communicate with each other. But they were able to mobilize, talk to each other, and organize and fight for independence, resist colonialism. We fought against apartheid with South Africans. We've been fighting all along. Why can't we, borrow that energy, dig into ourselves and see and look into the past and see how can we organize to fight for democracy back in our countries as post-independent states. We have, I think that's going to be a bit of a challenge because the international NGO sector has kind of, and some scholars and researchers, this has been like a disability, it has been like an imperialist underhand in a way. This is a case of where someone say you are independent, but again, they are coming in to spoon feed you and you fail to build capacity. That's why we are finding ourselves in this situation. If we didn't have this spoon feeding, we would have built capacities to encounter such challenges. But again, now it's like we are in the middle of the battlefield, and we don't have the skills. We are not ready. But we are there. But I think we have the capacity. Ochieno and friends and Ambassador Namboka, who have those people who have lived through the generation that fought Idi Amin. they would narrate how people organized. How did Ugandans organize to fight for democracy in Uganda during the days of Idi Amin? How did people mobilize? They didn't have foreign funding. They didn't have U.S. embassies issuing reports and all that. But they fought. And fighting doesn't mean, go to the bush, carry guns and shoot each other. No. There is fighting, like how South Sudan, like how the Sudanese chased Bashir from power. They demonstrated, young girls, young university students. They stood on the streets and said enough is enough. There are so many.
Admittedly, Miriam, it's a collective challenge for all of us to undertake, but I want to commend you for your positive outlook on things.
Is it okay to say something in addition, please?
Yeah, in a minute, yes, Ambassador.
Miriam has really touched the button. You see, you shouldn't lose hope as long as you still have one or two Ugandans in the diaspora where the machine at home silences everybody. On the external front, the president has, I think, inadvertently admitted that he's not in control. If he says people are doing everything, breaking the law, violating the constitution, sabotaging him, then on the international line, we have won the message delivery. It now means that we've been saying the truth all along. So do not feel as if this situation is a point where despair should log in. It is a point you should say, okay, we are not alone. There are some girls and boys abroad keeping the torch burning. That's all I wanted to add here.
Thank you. Joseph, you seem to want to react quickly. If you could use a minute.
No, I think I totally agree with Miriam. But Miriam, I've been telling you all along that you just need to up your game, and once in a while when you're in Kampala street, we better make some of these journeys and dare these guys. My slogan is, including to young Isaac, that is, it is possible. This country is possible. So when I use the word "it's possible," it means all these things can be done. And I think, again, I was telling a group only yesterday, actually, that particularly young Ugandans now, to our young presenter, and most of our viewers are going to be predominantly young people, is that some of the boys come up and then they boast, and I think I was even telling Miriam, and then they want to impress Miriam's nieces and junior cousins that, look, I am man enough, So if you are man enough and why don't you do what average men do? Why don't you come up with an initiative to decide that you'll cross Mabira, and if Mabira is closed, you can find other ways to reach Jinja, either jumping over the forest or taking another route. So now I think we just need determination and we need to resolve. But I think also to simply say that we need unity. I think we've in the more recent past we've had challenges of leadership, and leadership meaning men and women, and an idea that brings us like much more together. But I mean, that said, I don't think it has been this much for the question of leadership, the idea, the reason for us to be able to say no, because the level of NRA impunity today, you can't compare it with 10 years ago. It would be surprising coming from me, because while at least the extremes were happening in the north, while the Mukura massacres were taking place, the rest of the world was either indifferent or people didn't genuinely know. But today, whatever's happening in Uganda, as I said, even Idi Amin could not subject, some of his opponents to what these guys are doing. He would either do it or not. But to reach a situation in which opposition leaders, look what's happening to Besigye, what's happening to Lukwago, the manner in which Matembe, Sarah were being treated, whatever's going on with Mugumya. I don't know who advises Mr. Museveni, and I don't know where they get the courage.
Thank you, Joseph.
The challenge to Ugandans, I think Ugandans need to stand up and say no. And final point, if you don't like my Zach, people don't need to pick up arms. You don't need to throw stones in Kampala. People simply need to stand up and say no. And when they stand up and say no, these guys will listen. If they don't listen, we'll push them. Just check what happened in India just the other week amongst the students in India.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Joseph, and you lay a very good background for our next aspect of the discussion, which is the current amnesty program rolled out by the government. In its initial phase, it has targeted a total of 9 former political prisoners from the opposition National Unity Platform. These individuals have since been freed from the General Court Martial, never mind that sometime in 2025, the Supreme Court, in a landmark decision, appended the operational jurisdiction of that court to try civilians. And these are indeed civilians. So that also raises a legal controversy. But the actual issue is concerns are now being raised, especially by opposition political actors and the wider citizenry, that this process has violated each and every principle of fairness, of integrity. More or less, these individuals have been coerced to admit to these charges. So, Francis, the question I want to pose to you is that as a country, how are we able to really make significant headway politically if we cannot have, as a basic tenet of democracy, a fair and impartial judicial system? What concerns does this raise to you, this process of amnesty?
Oh, thank you and other fellow panelists. We have always said that the structure and institutions of government have collapsed to the extent that that's why Miriam, Joseph, and Ambassador are saying we have to take the ball back to the drawing board, to the people, and we say, how do we liberate ourselves? The Amnesty Commission in itself is a good thing, but it is being abused. Because if I may ask you, when did you see those young people, even including yourself, as rebels? Where were they captured? In which bush? In which meeting? These were people participating, exercising their political right to participate in a political journey of Uganda, but they were arrested. Now, yesterday, they say they have been granted amnesty. Do we even understand what the word amnesty means in the first place? And that's why the NRM, Museveni and his regime and his son, are taking Uganda into a dangerous path. That even when tomorrow you catch a chicken thief, you want them to confess that they did not steal a chicken, they stole maybe a helicopter, an army helicopter.
For information purposes, just sorry for the interjection, the government has qualified this process as one where the affected individuals voluntarily, on their own volition, applied for this sort of clemency, and therefore they have been considered, processed, and found worthy to be beneficiaries of the process.
Okay,
like that.
The victims themselves, they said, and you remember, they said, when we saw that things are not working out, we are not going to get freedom. The institution, the temple of justice, is dysfunctional. We said, can we resolve this in our own means? And believe me, even if it were you have been in jail, you are not appearing anywhere, you are being mistreated and so on, you are out of touch with your family, you would look for an immediate solution of getting out, and then you sort the rest out. They have confessed themselves that they did that because they wanted to be out of jail. And I agree with them. It was through coercion, not that they did it willingly, but because how we have said, our government does not always want to talk the truth. That's why they come to tell people that they did it willingly. Okay, if they did it willingly, why does government come to tell us that they have done it willingly? Let's see just something working out naturally. But what I'm saying, that is a bad precedent that government is setting. That, do you want to tell me that those NUP supporters and Jamil Mukuru, in your own view, are they under the same category? The answer is no. The answer is no. So it's what I'm saying, that it is because of the collapse of the institution of government, the Amnesty Commission, you saw the Human Rights Commission, name it, that is causing all this, and it is taking us through a dangerous path where things would be done in the right way, but things are done in the opposite way, and it is not correct, and I don't believe in that.
Thank you, Francis.
But what I believe in, though, is that yes, if we said that there could be people who have done rebel activities and they want to come back and be integrated among the population, then there should be an amnesty commission, but not to use it as a political tool against dissenting voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for your perspective. Ambassador, I want to invite you to weigh in on this complex issue of amnesty. Previously, this consideration was extended to former insurgents of the Lord's Resistance movement. That, of course, rebellion ravaged greater parts of northern Uganda. But today, we do not have an active rebellion in the country. As indeed Francis has correctly pointed out, these are political dissidents. They have not declared a war of rebellion against the government. So from an international human rights standpoint, please help us understand, is this approach by the government not the subject of a legal challenge?
Thanks a lot. Now, first of all, talking about amnesty, before you talk about an existence of a resistance organization or movement like the NRA was, is abnormal. There is no established armed resistance group in Uganda today against the existing authorities. Now, all we have is the normal legal requirement that if you have broken the law, if you're suspected of having infringed norms, you're served with an arrest warrant, you're taken in and presented to an independent autonomous judge, a court. Those things haven't happened. There hasn't been in Uganda a well-respected, known judicial system. If you take the case, just the recent case of the unfortunate Dr. Besigye, he's now been in prison for nearly 2 years. If we had systems that go by, you have committed this as a crime, it doesn't have to be a military court, a tribunal. You go through the normal civil courts of adjudication. Now, these people that we are talking about as having been given amnesty, against what crimes? When was there a judgment that heard them and maybe condemned them and sentenced them to a number of years, a number of months, against which now the presidential mercy or clemency is going to be legally exercised? That's the notion of amnesty. There has to be a process. So you're speaking to somebody who understands how municipal law, the law inside governments, states, works, in line with the established Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is normally reflected in the national constitutions, and so on and so forth. So when you speak about amnesty in a country where we know hundreds of citizens for political reasons have been languishing in prison for years, and all of a sudden you pick up a few, I think I heard the number being 9. It's an anomaly. It's almost a laughable way of showing the world that you're using justice and therefore amnesty. I have listened to Francis' explanation of this particular phenomenon and the names and whatnots. It's like the story we talked about of torture, that there have been hundreds tortured, and then you bring one person because that person happens to be known to, we don't know who. If it has to be a national practice, an established practice on all cases, and as long as the judicial system in the country remains captured, compromised, talking about amnesty is shallow, is empty, because it has to be within the definitions, the provisions of the law. And the rule of law in Uganda is the biggest headache all citizens know. And a while ago, you said, where do we still have hope? Because the institutions, the legislature has become a laughable entity. The judiciary is not performing as it should perform. Therefore, this story of amnesty is yet another facade. I hope that word means what it means in French and English.
Thank you, Ambassador. Miriam, the issue of amnesty, this is quite an emerging phenomenon in our jurisprudence as a country. As I indicated earlier, it was first introduced in the aftermath of the LRA insurgents in northern Uganda, and previously fellow compatriots Ugandans have benefited from this program or scheme, if you like. But in a modern state of Uganda that is not at war, what concern specifically does it raise about the competence and capacity of the judiciary to administer justice? Because we now seem to be at crossroads. There is a decision of the apex court of the country, the Supreme Court, to the effect that the operational jurisdiction of the General Court Martial with respect to civilians should be obliterated. And the government indicated willingness to implement that decision. And yet these amnesty proceedings are now a function of the General Court Martial trying civilians, because these are not combatants. Like ambassadors correctly pointed out, they have not claimed allegiance to any military group, any militant group in rebellion against the government. So what does it tell us about the state of justice in Uganda?
Thank you, Isaac. To give to give it a brief context, the NUP supporters who were imprisoned, they were young youth of National Unity Platform Party members who were arrested, I think, towards or after the 2021 elections. And most of them, all of them are non-combatants. And most of them, I think, you remember, they were arrested for wearing some red berets or something like that. And that's the excuse they used put them into the court martial. And even the arrest itself was abduction. It wasn't a normal arrest as we should be having, which normal arrests are conducted by the police and people are imprisoned or just kept in gazetted areas, known areas. The normal judicial procedure of arresting suspects and whatever was never followed. So these young people the military abducted them or just grabbed them from the streets. They were tortured. Then they were taken through a kangaroo court, military court, the court martial, which, like you said, was outlawed and shouldn't be trying civilians. So these young political prisoners are just, what is their crime? Their crime is not supporting Museveni. Their crime is not belonging to NRM. And the whole purpose of torturing them is to weaken the opposition, to weaken their party, to weaken their motivation to pursue their political interests. So the whole amnesty, like you said, yeah, the process is being abused in that aspect. But for these young people, it's anything really for their freedom. You can imagine someone you were arrested in for the last 5 years. There is no proper legal process to set you free or even to convict you, because what is their crime? Their crime is even nowhere there, nowhere here. So somehow even the government was stuck with them. And like the National Party platform said, the National Unity Party platform said, I think their leaders are saying that they have 1,300 of their members are in prisons across the country for no particular reason apart from just being opposition party members. And I don't know whether the government is also going to use that very excuse of amnesty, the whatever, to just go across the country and set these young people free after making them make false confessions and all that stuff. I earlier alluded that whatever is going on actually reminds us of Idi Amin regime and all those old dictatorships that we have been through, where people would be, like drugs and stuff, and all crazy charges would be put on innocent people, and they are either tortured to make false confessions and all that, and the same confessions are used even to torture more people. The fear right now is that Museveni and his regime are building up a narrative to incriminate National Unity Platform as quote unquote a terrorist organization, or a rebellious organization, something. I don't want to compare it with Konye LRA outfit, but if you are using the same methods that you used on Konye on them, what are you trying to build up? What are they insinuating? So the fear is that Seven wants to use these false confessions to incriminate other people, including the leaders of the National Unity Platform. And that's what should scare all of us, because these young people today are being, they are being put on, to make these false confessions in order to get their freedom from the government.
Thank you, Miriam.
It's gonna be either of us, and for whatever reason, if governments want to torture anybody or to arrest somebody, they just gonna look for those fake charges and put them on any individual, and that's what should scare us. My concern, Isaac, is that why is the judiciary so quiet about these things? They are opinion leaders. They are the other arm of government. In democracy, we have separation of powers, and the judiciary have the same powers the executive or the legislature. Why is our judiciary so silent about all these illegalities?
Perhaps Joseph will help us to answer the question, but I know Joseph has a quite keen interest in this matter, even the scholarly knowledge. Joseph, this question of amnesty raises serious concerns regarding the long-term implications for national political stability in the country, because it sets a very dangerous precedent where an innocent citizen can be framed as having participated in rebellion against the government, and therefore they are subjected to duress or coercion to confess to unlawful charges in order to win back their freedom. I think in many respects, the government is demonstrating that this is some sort of model which even successive governments can employ to sort of, entrench themselves in power. So in terms of long-term ramifications for our political stability as a country, what would be your assessment of this?
I really hope that the level of impunity we've experienced in the last 40 years under NRA is never repeated in our country. I want to tell you, as a matter of fact, that except under Idi Amin, there has never been equivalent of 20% of what we've experienced under NRA. In fact, what has happened in the last 3 years, starting with Kizza Besigye, you could squeeze them and look through the two Obote administrations, and I'm not sure whether you will find anything closely related, because I get some nuances from Miriam in terms of past regimes. Amin was a dictatorship. Obote's time, there was a specific incident that people keep coming back into, the detention without trial that involved specifically ministers who were known for a fact and confirmed were conspirators in a coup against a democratically elected government. Anything other than that, you'd relate with the Sabadukas, the guys who Ben Chiwanuka and others mobilized and organized again to seek to assassinate the president. All facts and evidence. Those guys went to Luzira. They were not very subjected to whatever we are seeing opposition leaders and members and junior supporters are going through. In fact, for the ministers, there is even a story that they were leading a life of top-notch high prison, Apollo Hotel, Sheraton equivalent in prison. But of course, prison is prison. You can't be, you can't define it by anything else. So, and in fact, in any case, theirs was detention. No, what is happening is a clear attempt by NRA to break NUP. I think to cause division within NUP. But number three, also, of course, to cause reason for young people in Uganda, particularly without prejudice in Buganda, not to join, support, or feel comfortable at home within NUP, and so therefore pose themselves as an alternative of political organizations against NRA, and then for the rest of the young people across the country not to have any reason to join this particular political organization or any other political organization, including UPC, which is not necessarily in this case NRA. That's what Mr. Museveni is doing. You know, it's a continuation of impunity, of torture, of brutality, but one basically set and designed to make sure that Ugandans perfect the art of living in fear. In terms of the question of the judiciary, Miriam, please do not contradict yourself. I'm not quite sure whether the issue is whether or not we can ask what the judiciary is doing. It is the case we concede that, you know, we are operating under state capture. So all the institutions are under state capture. In fact, as it happens, we all know, all the 4 or 5 of us here know, that there are some judges who are actually decent men and women. There are certain aspects of the judiciary as established that there is no reason why, if left alone, would not subject Ugandans to a due process of the law or to a decent judicial process. But no, we are basically under state capture, and so unfortunately, the question should not be what is the judiciary doing, but rather, why are members of the judiciary not examining their conscience, just like we've been challenging ourselves, the 5 of us, whether or not we are doing enough, and most of our viewers, predominantly young people, why they are not coming up and boldly challenging the impunity which is being presented by NRA. The criminality notwithstanding, as I said, these guys have been subjected to torture, and to, as everyone else has already said, that to say that you're granting them amnesty is basically you the investigator, the arrester, detainer, the torturer, the judge and jury, basically to determine that people have committed offenses. But it may be another element, Isaac, that maybe the NRA realizes that they still have to account to Uganda's international community. So compel these people that to come out and say that they committed these offenses, and so hence release them, in part is to qualify part of what Miriam was saying, but maybe to cleanse their image. But there is no way in which anything that is happening today with this particular matter does not make the entire process of NRA administration recently, as far as managing and dealing with questions of human rights, nothing else but basically a point of laughter. I want to repeat on this program, there was never a time I know, in the 2 UPC administration, because the only other long administration has been, Idi Amin's, the interim administration of Mwanga, Binaisa, and Lule, neither here nor there, But there was no time in the previous two administrations where a member of parliament would be held, detained, and disappeared and then reappeared. Never. There was never a time through all this time that you would say that a leader of opposition is possibly held at a roadblock. Museveni likes the nonsense of his journey between there and Mukono, where he was then, when he was already suspect and already declared anyway that he was going to the bush. Granted, he was held. Being held at a roadblock to be explained around does not qualify yourself to the extremes the NRA did. The Museveni's held us in Makere University students, a whole bus of us for a whole day. Can we equate that with the man, whatever was subjected to him when he was already suspect? Were Makere University students returning from Nairobi University on a bus, actually on a graduation day, in Makere, the first graduation that Museveni was subjecting in Makere to as then Chancellor of the university. So some of these things are neither here nor there. Ugandans,
thank you, Joseph.
What is happening at the moment is unacceptable and is shameful.
Thank you, Joseph. And I'm going to ask you briefly in a minute or so to comment on the latest report of the Freedom House on the Ugandan human rights situation. More or less, it really summarizes the substance of what we have been discussing. It is a very distressing and grim outlook. But please, your comments and what it really means for Uganda as a member of the international community.
Part of my frustration is this, and I was meeting with a political leader of a major nation state as part of our bumping on one another and our ordinary friendships. And we're busy revisiting. And this particular individual was delighted to see that I was still putting on red, because these are people whom we're telling 20 years ago and talking about the extremes taking place in our country. And they thought Mr. Museveni was a special angel that had been sent by God to rescue the Republic of Uganda. So today, for me, for these guys, I would simply say that, well, we told you so. As it happens also, I was having a discussion with a former minister, now a retired politician, actually, and these are people whom we're telling about whatever was happening at the time. And again, as I repeat, These are people who are saying that those of us who were then in exile were the bad guys, and the good guys were then Paul Semugera. I'm just bringing in DP here because they were part of Museveni's coalition. The international community, in part, has net contributed to this impunity. I was watching a video the other day where Madeleine Albright, the former U.S. Secretary of State, was literally, she was holding Museveni like a special angel, calling Uganda a beacon of hope, and presenting Museveni, Kagame, Afeki, and Meles at the time as the new breed of African leaders. The international community contributed to this. I can also say, since you asked me, that even some of the leaders of the international human rights organizations that we tried to approach, the Amnesty Internationals of this world, were as partisan as the Bretton Woods institutions associated with particular Western nation states that were then using Mr. Museveni. It's not surprising that Mr. Museveni has now become like a mini-spoiled child, and that they can hardly know what to do with them. But fair enough, you realize I'm not talking about a very specific report. This thing's not about that report. We know these things anyway, and we've gone through them. My point is, how does the international community take a position at the moment and subject themselves to a manner in which they're able to use the leverages that they used for building Museveni and NRA, to use those very same leverages to make sure that these impunities must stop? Because people like yourselves, who are part of the future, there's no reason why you should be subjected to the extremes of NRA today, sometimes on the grounds of, without foundation, of trying to correct some historical wrongs in our country.
Ambassador, I want to invite you to express your thoughts also on the issue of the conclusion by the Freedom House that Uganda is classified as not a free state. What does this mean for our standing, both globally, but also most importantly for the Ugandan citizen at home? Because even as we discuss, there could be certain obstructive considerations, but the person that really gets to, in real time, feel this weight, the weight of civility, the weight of captivity, the weight of violation of their rights, is the Ugandan citizen. So what does it mean? Can we draw a nexus? Do these reports really help the Ugandan citizen in terms of highlighting their plight, in terms of amplifying their agitation?
Well, first of all, there was a word I need to repeat here. When a person is forced, we say under duress, to confess guilt, that legally is not accepted in the process of analyzing judgment. So if, as we said, many of the people that are being offered amnesty are being given that because of forced confessions of having committed crimes, that doesn't hold legally. The world looks. It's one thing to be within Uganda, and the way the laws are applied or not applied in Uganda, that's the municipal practice. But from the outside, from the international system, from the United Nations system, those are no starters. That's one thing. But as to the report classifying Uganda as not a free state, a free country, where the rule of law has collapsed, there are people who are in Uganda today, not necessarily in politics, but living their innocent lives. If the majority of people in the country have that sentiment that they cannot go about their business according to the regular laws on the book, then the report is saying what is right. There is the official state declaration by those in authority. That's one voice. But civil society is considered as an entity that is just as important as the people that govern them. And the world system outside Uganda does not have the limitations, like you say, the law, the Uganda law, the Bar Association, or journalists or NGOs inside Uganda may have their rights to exercise their functions limited internally. But we are looked at, we are observed from abroad. You may wish to know, just in case the members of the discussion panel doesn't know, in the country, the people who belong, the countries belonging to the United Nations system have in every country the United Nations country team. These are offices, UNESCO, WHO, UNDP, and so on and so forth. These institutions, these programs in every country constitute the United Nations country team. Those institutions, those branches of the UN work hand in hand with the government of the country every single day. And they each present their reports to their headquarters at the end of the year. But on top of that, the country, United Nations country team, in conjunction with the country, must produce a yearly report. So there is no way what is going wrong will be unknown. It's simply being short-sighted to believe that we are doing this and nobody can stop us and we get away with impunity. It doesn't work that way. And those of us who belonged to the public service at home and left and ended up in the United Nations system can advise first the ordinary Ugandan who is not a criminal, who is trying to live his life, but simply sees the rights and entitlements infringed upon, reduced. The world knows. Now, I'm not party to the group that wrote the Freedom House report on countries like Uganda, but Uganda do not have to worry about that. The people that need to worry now are the people in power. I wonder whether I make myself clear. When the country is categorized as a failed state, for example, it's not for the people to worry. They can only worry in terms of what they are suffering from. Unable to get medical treatment, unable to go to see a relative, not having enough money to eat. Those are the worries that are real, and you can say Ugandans are worried about those. But a report which classifies a country as without freedoms should be a source of comfort to the population that is begging to be heard. And the government has its freedom, the people in authority have the freedom to acknowledge that and to revisit what they're doing to their own people. So this kind of categorization is like saying that country is an underdeveloped country. It's for you, the people in the country, particularly those in authority, to do things right. The world now knows there is no freedom here. It isn't the parties that may be not in minority. So do not be hit and dispirited because there has been such a report. The UN knows what's going on. The people of Uganda know what is going on, where it hurts, where there is deprivation. They haven't written this report, but now the world systems which monitor the country's conduct and behavior and respect for norms as established are the ones saying to us, Ugandans, and those we have in office, whether we have chosen them, whether they have imposed them on us, they are just saying that country now does not have freedom.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Miriam, discussing the findings of the report, and let me just relate it to the current conversation in Parliament. This week, we have seen the leader of the opposition in Parliament, the Honorable Joel Senyonyi, take to the floor to demand that the government lifts suspensions affecting a number of civil society organizations in the country, which were suspended during the just concluded electoral season. And one of the key issues the report is citing is that we are living in a climate of deep repression, deep and sustained repression by the state. Civil society organizations have been clamped down. Most of the actors have been intimidated. Political activists are arbitrarily arrested, and some of them are even facing false charges and whatnot. So, I want to pick your mind on where exactly we are. If you think that perhaps the conclusion of this report could eventually inform the response of the government, because there is a demand in Parliament, and the citizens are demanding that their voice should be amplified. If it cannot be done strictly by political actors, as is the case, then the civil society should be able to fill that void. Do you see this happening? Can the conclusion and findings of this report perhaps inform the government to rethink its position and attitude?
Unmuting, can I just say something quickly?
Oh, yes, sure.
You know, I think you are provoking me to talk about my case. My case is so boring to me that sometimes I feel actually traumatized to just repeat it. But I thought as we wait for Miriam to organize herself, maybe you drop by a note, in fact, you know, is that, you know, your other panelists may not know that I went through a judicial process for UPC leadership. That's why I was teasing Isaac. So Isaac and I know the background, you know, that I should be president of Uganda People's Congress, which I should, in fact, because I won elections in December 2020, took institutional challenges. But because of the internal challenges in the party,
and you won the case as well.
Oh yeah, predominantly caused by Muslims. That's fair enough. Yes, I mean, but yeah. So we also have to take responsibility. The election process was fudged, and so I decided to challenge it because I wanted to challenge impunity in the party, just like we're challenging impunity under NRA. And I can tell you that I went to court on March 17th, 2021. With advice of decent lawyers, including the young Isaacs. Not that he necessarily advised, but he is a young, fantastic lawyer in town, you know, emerging lawyer, to seek a judicial review. A judicial review is, you know, I expected it should not take more than 6 months, and Isaac, as a lawyer, would tell us. And so we thought it was an easy way. So by mid-2021, we knew that it would have resolved the issue of the leadership. What does it do? The idea was that they would go through with the evidence I provided to prove that I actually won the election and I be declared president of the party. But number two, to issue a permanent injunction against Jim Akena, whom the same courts had allowed to stay in Uganda House for over 5 years because the matter in an appeal in the Court of Appeal had not been heard. That matter is now 5.5 years. A matter of judicial review has never been disposed of. It has gone through 4 judges and now 2 chief justices. So I think that's part of what Isaac was trying to say. So if you see that and then you go through these judges, of those 4 judges, one I never met, the first one I didn't even meet, you know. You meet these people and then they see you and you see them in the face. The current judge, without prejudice, I still my future is still in her hands. You sometimes seeing these individuals in their faces, you know, a very apparent helplessness, you know. They know what should be done, but they're incapacitated. You know, Justice Joyce Kavuma, you know, who is currently, we're waiting for since November 2026, when she said that she had everything, we're only waiting for a ruling, and is now nearly coming to again another 1 year. In front of our court, there is that thing that says justice denied is
No, delayed.
Tell us?
Delayed.
Justice delayed.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
Denied is terrible, and then something delayed is something. Those things.
Denied.
And it's in front of this judge. This judge is called Chambers. Actually, I have the picture in my phone, and I'm saying, so no, our country, the level of impunity, but the manner in which Ugandans have suddenly now become shameless, institutionally, and even we as individuals, the way maybe Ochieno might treat a young man like Isaac when he meets him in the streets, or we get engaged in small businesses and discussions and things like that, or maybe I give him a counsel as an elder, and then by tomorrow morning I'm treating him as if he's doing me a favor by being present around me. We've got major issues, but those are a direct result, in my opinion, as I said, not only of a mini-failed state, but as I said, the state under capture.
Interesting perspectives, Joseph. We are hard pressed for time, so I'll ask Miriam to respond at once to the last segment of our discussion. But let me just give as a means of a background, away from the doom and gloom of Kampala, really, we have some pleasant news in the fact that our fellow compatriot, Ambassador Olaara Otunnu, is in contention to replace Antonio Guterres as the next Secretary General of the United Nations. The latest update we have is that Kampala has constituted a task force to promote and also coordinate operations with respect to his candidature, and they have consequently been dispatched to New York ahead of the poll. But the key question I want to ask is that away from the stellar attributes and qualities of Ambassador Otunnu, there seems to be serious concerns among the citizenry that the Ugandan regime is employing him as some sort of prop to whitewash, its gruesome and appalling human rights record, in a sense to fend off that pressure, especially at the international plane. So let me ask you, Joseph, again, because you know the man, I suppose you have quite related intimately, worked together in the previous regime at a certain point. Bring us up to speed. First and foremost, who is the man?
I thank you, Isaac. Can you hear me?
Yes, please. Sure.
Yeah, very good. And thank you for asking, because I've been having challenges with network. So let me deal with it so that in the event that there are any complications, that I don't lose out and your viewers don't lose out. Yes, I have known Olaara Otunnu for quite some time. And of course, I know him. He's my former party president. I noticed that in the brief background that was being given, I think that particular slot was missed. The fact that he was president of Uganda People's Congress that replaced Mama Miriam. Unlike Mama Miriam, he is the one president who willingly served only one term for the presidency of the party. Obviously, he had his own internal challenges in the party that people might say were precious, but they're not precious enough to necessarily push him. So he voluntarily and willingly served one term, just as Mama Miriam voluntarily and willingly served one term. In Mama Miriam's case, she actually gave it as a condition to her accepting to stand as a candidate. Now, Olaara Otunnu, of course, the rest some of the other elements about him are known. The fact that he was one of the stellar students at Makerere University, absolutely courageous. The courage that we are asking you, Isaac, to join in. That these are guys who were able to stand up to Idi Amin, not in spite of the brutality that Amin was subjecting, particularly to the northern community, and particularly to the community of Acholi, which Olaara Otunnu comes from, and Lango, and then of course wider broader taste on fire, but particularly those two identical communities. Olaara Otunnu, as president of the Students' Guild, was able to stand up against him, together with a number of others. But that is him. Of course, our academic records I know that with the influence of Milton Obote, who was then in Zambia, rather in Dar es Salaam, these guys got scholarships from British government and indeed went to Oxford and then later Harvard. But Olaara Otunnu, if you want to talk about who qualifies to be the next Secretary General of the United Nations, there's nobody else who qualifies more than him. He was the youngest president of the Security Council, I think at age 30, 31 or thereabout. He was one of the youngest permanent representatives to the United Nations. He was one of the sharpest brains. The initiatives and issues that he dealt with, I think Ambassador will come and talk about because he's much more familiar about that, including introducing the Otunnu formula that I think again I will let the Ambassador talk about, as part of a mechanism for breaking deadlocks in the nominations appointments of candidates. The big issues they dealt with at the UN at the time when there was this continued US imperialism in Grenada and other spaces. Olaara Otunnu did stellar jobs. Obviously, much later he came back and served as foreign minister in Tito Kello's regime, and then after that, he was party to these discussions with Museveni to try and coalesce around a Republic of Uganda post Milton Obote's second overthrow, with the hope, I think, so they thought that they would have a partner in Mr. Museveni, but it didn't work. After that, of course, then he returned to the UN. Olaara Otunnu, people would say that is coming in a little bit late. What I know is that twice, 10 years ago, Olaara Otunnu was a front-runner candidate for UN, but he was not able to get through because there was no country. I mean, Uganda basically was not willing to back him. And so at that time, the information I have, particularly in 1996, I think, Olaara Otunnu had the backing of all the permanent 5 members and 7 others. So as I understand it, of the 15 votes that you must get in order, of the 15 votes of the UN Security Council, Olaara Otunnu almost certainly had 12 at the time. Obviously, it did not happen, and here's where we are. The latest in terms of the concerns by the citizens, and there will be no more citizen more concerned about anything dubious with Mr. Museveni than myself. I think the assurance is that Olaara Otunnu will be one of the last Ugandans, to possibly sell out Ugandans today. You may like the guy or not, but I can assure you that. But again, I don't know in the last 8 months or 6 months, whatever would have happened. But the information I have is that while the rest of the other candidates were campaigning in the last 12 months, none of them tickled the global powers that be enough to represent not only a major contender, but a major a person to replace the current Secretary General as Secretary General. So, contrary maybe to speculation that the NRA put him forward, and in fact, contrary to the speculation, and that's not normally nice in interviews, that Olaara Otunnu decided to go for the position. My understanding and my information is that actually Olaara Otunnu was sought globally. Where is this perfect, should be a Secretary General of the United Nations, Olaara Otunnu, and where is he these days? It is the case that actually Olaara Otunnu was sort of sought out from rural, actually where he had retreated, working around the rehabilitation and reconstruction of actually communities through their Rocho Pacho programs with Justice Owindolo. And when he was sought and I think persuaded to return with the reasonable guarantee that he will get the support, the next issue was whether or not he would get the support of the nation state, the Republic of Uganda. I'm sure at that stage, the conversation about whether or not the government would support him came in.
Thank you, Joseph, for that brilliant exposition of the man. Let me, before I go to Ambassador, because I want to probe him on the aspect of the real chances that we have, because recently a straw poll has been run based on a formula. It's an interesting twist of reality, which the man himself devised.
Yes.
But the outcome was not something I think to write home about. But let me first go to Francis.
Do you mind? Let me just deal with that if you don't mind. Actually, you know.
Oh, okay.
No, that is exactly what I'm saying. That is part of Olaara Otunnu formula as presented. That straw poll is to build consensus, but that straw poll is also to discourage candidates. That straw poll, Olaara got two encouragements because Olaara was a latecomer for the reasons I've given you. One, number two, Olaara had not engaged any of the nation states. Olaara had not yet even addressed members of the Security Council. As I understand, that is what something is going to happen in the next couple of weeks or so, you know, to engage the Security Council. From then on, I think the numbers would and should be slightly different. So I repeat, Olaara came late because of the reasons that I gave as a contextual background, rather than anything else. And number two, those proposals are neither here nor there. But most importantly, at the back of your minds, whoever gets the backing of the 5 permanent members, or whoever avoids veto or discouragement by the 5 permanent members. So the issue is whether or not Olaara still has the favor of the 5 permanent members. I really genuinely hope, because I want to conclude this partly because I have issues with network, that I really genuinely hope that Olaara gets an opportunity, because that in itself will not only be a fantastic thing for Uganda and for Africa and for this brilliant man, but maybe for once it may be an opportunity that may try and heal the fact that the Ugandan authorities very shamefully declined to offer the guy's candidature at that time. But for the moment, we are speaking together.
Francis, let me bring you in. From a citizen standpoint, what is your perspective? Do you think Ambassador Olaara Otunnu, first and foremost, stands a chance? But let me also take you back to the question that I posed to Joseph, which is that, is the Kampala regime tactfully employing Ambassador Olaara Otunnu as a prop to whitewash its appalling human rights record?
Thank you. Number one is we welcome the candidature of Otunnu, and for a fact, he's the most qualified person to run for that office in as far as other candidates that he's running with is concerned. But then he comes into the picture late. It is like you want to go and sell fish, but you come into the market where people are almost preparing dinner. So however much you have fish, people have already either bought, let's say, maybe beans, or they have already bought maybe dodo to go and prepare because they have been waiting for long. But that speaks volume to our country. Does our country take stock of its human resource? Does our country know the capacities of its human resource, how to deploy them and how to encourage them? Or our country is like a pig or a chicken that has a bad vice that will always eat its own chicks, or it will always eat its own eggs. All these, I will again give an example of Ambassador himself here that we are with on this talk show. Has our country taken stock of all these diplomatic kind of brains that we have to say that how do you strategically parade them? That speaks that Uganda right away from the past didn't have a strategy. That's why you find, I don't know who tipped them, then from nowhere they wake up and say, oh, why don't we push also a candidate? And which is already late. Others started around April, but now for us we are entering the race around July, at the end of July almost, which is a little bit a big challenge. Where the record may speak for itself of Otunnu, but early entrance is also an important factor to consider. Second, I would also talk about the point of region. We still have regional politics world over. In most cases, I would say we might get a very stiff competition from Latin America, because for them they have also been like trying to push their candidates and so on. And now, given the political situation, especially within the members of the Security Council, the dynamics may change. That it may also not be technical knowledge of how to manage these affairs, but it may be technical know-how. I have seen these dynamics also coming and playing in, all of which are not in our favor. And the other aspect I have also seen, my seniors on this show, the other fact I have seen is the divided Africa. You are aware that is it Macky from Senegal, the former president of Senegal, is coming in. So he divides the vote of Africa than consolidating it. So if he continues to stay in the race, generally, to me, the PR that Uganda would be coming in is for our team to go and convince the Senegalese candidate to step down. And then we have Otunnu and we have the vote from Africa as a consolidated bloc. Then I would also echo my senior citizens here will again excuse me. Otunnu stands again another disadvantage, that among the demographic is not in his favor. Among the candidates that are vying for this position, he's the only one who is, I think, 75. And you know, sometimes some of these things, age plays some critical role. So if that plays in, it becomes a little bit of a disadvantage if they don't understand his capability and then they dwell on his physical energy to run whatever activities are there in the UN. And lastly, they have been
finally, in a minute, you haven't answered my central question, which is, do you think the Kampala regime is being deliberate in applying him as an instrument to try to ingratiate itself with the global powers that be and get back into their own membranes?
That's why I'm telling you that indirectly, whether that is their approach, their strategy is lacking. But however, I don't think that is what they are trying to do. After all, the roles of the UN or the Secretary General have nothing to do with the political dynamics within his country of origin. So if that is if that is one of their strategies, that if he becomes the Secretary General, it would help them, then they are smartly dressed, going nowhere.
Thank you, Francis. Let me now invite Ambassador to weigh in. Ambassador, you have a comprehensive understanding of the UN operational structure, its systems, and indeed, even the entire outlook of this electoral process and modalities to replace the current Secretary General. Making your assessment, looking at things, where do you think we stand? Because Francis has highlighted a very interesting complication in that the other contender is an African representative in the former president of Senegal, Macky Sall. Do you think that in some respects, does it not constitute a handicap for Ambassador Olaara Otunnu? But also the fact that he's Ugandan. We are talking of a global system with shared principles, with shared responsibilities, shared values to humanity, to rule of law, to human rights. Looking at our political and human rights record, aren't some member states going to feel some sort of disorientation, or if you like, maybe a lack of trust and confidence that Uganda could be best placed to serve in such a critical responsibility? Your assessment, Ambassador.
Thank you, Isaac. One thing I should start with, I know His Excellency Ambassador Olaara Otunnu as an OB, I was his elder at school. He was next to me in the residence hall, and I've known him. On the question of his merits, personality, intellectual prowess, diplomatic style, and demeanor, he is top. Now, it becomes a question of procedure, and this is where our own debate was concerned with the municipal laws, the rule of law. In the system, in the international system, particularly the United Nations system, it is a law-governed system. We fail by not submitting our candidate in time. That's just straightforward. There is no biasness. When people have submitted, and of course submitting a candidate is preceded by campaigning and canvassing in other countries, so that you know you have people standing supporting you. So we seem to have not done the homework that would be necessary and submitting our candidate in time. Those are technical aspects that the system that prepares the files of candidates, including him on the panel for people to debate and compare, be looked at. We didn't meet those. Those come as failure again by our own state. We never seem to respect the demands of law and order on this specific thing also. And of course, there is the history when Olaara Otunnu, as a brilliant Ugandan in his 40s, 50s, needed to postulate for this position, we weren't available for him. Now, Francis is telling you that Olaara Otunnu is turning up as an elder, 75 years of age. The UN normally will ask us to leave at 62. You see, you're considered a spent force. You go on retirement. Now, Uganda is bringing forward as a candidate, because we don't see age limit in our own business. So we are now turning up late in the procedural lineup with a 75 person. Those, even before you go into how when we're doing exams, you used to have mock exams. There were those mock results of this candidature evaluation, and you were going to show us, I think, maybe you wanted to show those who discouraged, those who are negative, these who are neutral, things like this. Those are the details, but believe me, the job in the United Nations, even as low as we were, a Secretary General does not sleep. I said above that I was a public servant in our own country for 13 years. Then I went into the UN. And I know that these jobs, you don't begin doing that work when you're 70, 72, 75 coming. Because you need the body. The body requires a certain respect for nature. So I don't see our candidate, Olaara Otunnu, who is a personal friend of mine, someone as a Ugandan I really have much respect for and liking. I don't see him making it against those considerations. But if the government of Uganda decides to throw him in, we can pray for a miracle. And miracles always happen when man cannot say this will be this.
Ambassador, lastly, considering the somewhat, not necessarily hostile, but cold relationship between the Kampala regime, the NRM government, and Ambassador Otunnu, which has been intermittently marked with certain chapters of animosity and strained relations. What do you think would be the particular motivation by the government to forward him, submit him as a candidate for this position, as a representative for Uganda specifically?
As a student of political science and governance, the president may want to please the people of Acholi land. You talked about the former Chief Justice Dolo, who may be speaking good words about the government to Olaara Otunnu. I think Minister Mao also is from Acholi, I suppose. These are people within government. And if we want to create good relations between Acholi and government, they may have prepared the president to accept Olaara Otunnu and even look like they're flinging him to the front, raising him as a flag. That can be, and there is nothing bad with that. But I'm saying that if they had done this within the normal expectations of the system, let's say last year. Now, you just talked about now funds, arrangements being made. It's like making a wedding after people have got married. You know,
Thank you,
I don't
Ambassador.
understand. You just said it now. They're beginning. They going to do the marketing and the work should have had done a year ahead of what Olaara Otunnu is being announced to be. It's not after this first mock exam that you begin saying, now I'm going to spend money. I have a little sense of humor when I hear news like this.
It's a wait and see approach. We can only express our best wishes and confidence that indeed he will represent us. Professor, let me ask Professor in a minute, Joseph and Francis to respond to this question, because you all have a sense of the international experience and the mechanics that operate at that level. So, Professor, let me start with you. Tapping into your experience at the international plane, where do you think the big players are, most likely to swing?
Okay, let's do it this way. From an external standpoint, our earlier statement was that our country is being looked at as a country without freedom. So when you throw that forward, even the Americans as friends don't want to be like they're supporting a country without freedom. You see, that is something sensitive. Americans like to feel like, they're supporting something democratic. So if information is running that we as a country are not free, they are not going by the rule of law, and we are throwing somebody at the top of the United Nations world system, they may not be faced with an easy choice. On the other hand, though, you feel that the United Nations and the United States weighs in a lot in these matters, at least at the level of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council. But that is counterbalanced by the veto capacity of other countries which may not necessarily sympathize with the American preference. You see, if China, Russia, France, and Britain did not feel that the candidate the US is fronting is acceptable to them, they may exercise their power of veto and fail the US. So it's more than the US in the decision-making level of the Security Council. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Exactly. Thank you, Ambassador, and sorry for the earlier mishap.
We shall correct my name. At the end, I will correct my name.
But undoubtedly, in the context of this conversation, it's a worthy title. Joseph, let us highlight the gender aspect, because there is talk that, this time round, for the first time, it should be a woman. And I think that's a very dominating element of this conversation. What is your reading of the race, considering the inclinations of the big players, the 5 members of the Security Council, but most importantly, the Americans?
I think, in part, as we're saying, that this debate came in very late for us in Uganda, because up to the other month, my personal interest and attention and focus was not as deep, because we had no direct interest. So I need to be as fair as possible. But on the question of the gender, it's obviously true, yes, that the 2 women particularly bring in an interesting perspective. And for the moment, the candidate from Costa Rica, Rebecca Greenspan, somewhat like that, and the other from Guyana, are women. And as I understand it, without prejudice to identity, it's believed that one of them has got a Jewish refugee background in South America, being Jewish, being formerly refugee, being in South America, from South America, and being a woman, may actually play to her advantage. The lady from Guyana, I think Caroline Burkett or something like that, equally, but in her case, I think on the basis of recent straw poll, I don't think she did as well as this other. But as I said, this is early times, can be anything else. So the gender perspective is there, and as I said, these are guys coming from South America. But that said, generally, actually, when it comes to these positions, it is sort of like less about what the specific individual permanent member wants in a candidate, but rather why they want such a candidate. So in the event that there is a particular candidate for whom America is interested in, but for a strategic American interest, and the strategic American interest, which in this case, say Russia or China, particularly those 2, see as contrary to their interest or a threat to their own regional strategic interests or country, nation state interests, they would then possibly veto. But generally, I think what happens in recent times, particularly around after the death of the Cold War, what has been predominant is more about whether or not these particular individual candidates, on their own merit, have got qualities and positions that will not necessarily compromise the interests of any of the 5 permanent members. And because of its nature, by its own nature, like 3 ideological fronts, it tends to be a very big balancing act. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but as I understand it for the moment, there is no reason why candidate Olaara Otunnu, for all the issues and the reasons we've given, should possibly be vetoed by any of the other permanent members. Just like I don't know whether or not there would be any reason why any of the permanent members would feel particularly uncomfortable with the other candidates, except for one that I've sort of suggested by nuances.
Thank you, Joseph, for that insightful discussion. It's a very complex process indeed. But Francis, to just wrap it up for us, you are in the States. We have fielded a candidate, a representative of Uganda, a representative of Africa. That raises a conflict already for the African, bloc vote. You indicated earlier that it's a complication. Indeed, we agree. But let us now consider the other dynamics at the international stage. For the first time, the South Americans are saying it is their turn. They have not had, I think, a person serve in that role from their subcontinent. Then we have the representative. I don't know this time round if we have a front runner from Europe, but I know we have a significant majority by the ladies, and Joseph has already highlighted the aspect of the gender and how it could play out. But what are the feelers in the States reading like?
Thank you for this question and for a well elaborated discussion on this particular question by Joseph and Ambassador on what UN considers. But for me, I would say that there is nothing that can stop the US from backing Dr. Olaara Otunnu's candidature. But however, that would come, like as I said, from the strategic approach that Uganda uses or should have used in preparation of their candidate. For example, if we know that if any of the permanent Security Council members vetoes, then it means your candidate will not go through. Now, which means that the question should be, has our Ugandan government been in touch with these 5 permanent members? Are they in good diplomatic relations or engagements have they been going on? Because if not, therefore, we don't want to reach a situation where our candidate is the butt of conflict, where maybe US would say yes, but Russia, because of their own tension that they have with the US, and then says no, and then we find that it creates a very complex kind of situation. Or maybe
Francis,
China. Yes.
Strictly for information purposes, recently the president had an engagement with diplomatic representatives of the 5 permanent security members of the United Nations, wherein he made the formal submission and presented the credentials and the name of Ambassador Olaara Otunnu for consideration for the position of Secretary General. So I just thought that I would highlight it.
Meeting them and presenting credentials is a stage, but having diplomatic, meaningful relations and engagements is something different. So it's what I'm talking about. And remember, these countries come with their own ideologies and their own interests. And you see, that is the problem that we have as Uganda. In most cases, we go into something without a national interest. Either it is an interest of an individual, that the whole country is not, I would not say ideologically, but strategically oriented towards something. And that's where we have always gone wrong. And if it is just a matter of posturing, meeting and having pictures without a prior kind of concrete arrangement, it would pose us a very great threat, even when we have the strongest candidate that does exist, because there is a lot of politics also that goes or that is behind these ordinary meetings and so on. But I hope that our candidate is able to catch up with the time lost, and then our diplomatic team is able to convince these other members that are responsible for voting before now is referred to the General Assembly to fully convince them that we have a candidate. Of course, our candidate sells himself, but as a country at a global stage, what we have to offer in as far as supporting our candidate is concerned. So I think that is where the focus should be, for us to be able to achieve or secure this office. But the road is still an uphill task for us to do. But we pray that we do it successfully.
Indeed, it is still a long and winding road for Ambassador Olaara Otunnu, but our best wishes as fellow compatriots and Africans at large. I want to appreciate you, my panelists, Francis Kamuhanda, Joseph Ochieno, and Ambassador, for your able participation on today's edition of the Diaspora Show.